Spaineva was reflecting back on some of the stories that her grandparents used to tell her. She remembered one in particular that she had a hard time understanding. It took her grandmother a great deal of time to explain it to her before she was able to comprehend the concept. It was almost as if Spaineva was from a different culture than her grandparents, and they were trying to explain to her something that was inconceivable to her. In a way, the concept that they were trying to explain to her was inconceivable to her: loneliness. Her grandparents liked to have little chats every once in a while. They would tell her about how things were like for their grandparents, which would leave Spaineva in awe much of the time. So much of what happened 4 generations ago was so hard for Spaineva to understand. She would often respond with the phrase, "People actually lived like that?" She wasn't being condescending or intentionally cute, but she was being genuinely confused. It was hard for this little girl to comprehend people going from A to B in a structure that required the destruction and intentional harming of nature. This was something that Spaineva couldn't ever imagine doing herself, and it was something that she was glad wasn't the norm in the world she lived. In fact, rarely did you see anyone being mobile in the same ways they used to 80 years ago. Spaineva learned that these structures were called cars and planes. While in her time, people still traveled around in structures, they didn't travel around in structures that were so harmful. As Spaineva listened to her grandmother tell her about loneliness, she had to use much of her focus. This word and concept was something that was not easily graspable for her. Her grandmother would tell her that loneliness was when people felt like they were the only person in the universe. They felt like they couldn't connect with anyone and that they had no one to connect with. Spaineva laughed when her grandmother said this. She thought it absurd that people felt like they had nothing to connect with. Her grandmother understood her laugh, but explained to her that people haven't always believed about the aliveness of all things. People would convince themselves that things weren't alive, and this was how they were able to rationalize to themselves the intentional harming of nature. Hearing her grandmother speak these words made Spaineva a little sad. There were actually people at one time who felt like they were the only thing on the planet. They were people who felt so alienated from other people that they felt like they couldn't connect. They were people who felt that there wasn't aliveness in all things, and by extension, made it okay for them to intentionally harm nature. Just sitting and reflecting back on the conversation she had with her grandmother about these concepts brought the feeling of sadness back to her. She was experiencing sadness not because she felt alone, no, but because people, at one point, felt like they were alone. Spaineva was able to tap into the sadness of the situation and, by extension, feel it. She knew enough not to stifle this emotion and just to allow it to happen. As she was experiencing the sadness, she got an idea. This made her smile as she was already getting images of what she was going to do. Still with this feeling of sadness, she decided that she was going to heal, not necessarily for her, but because of the nature of connection for her as well. Spaineva knew it was confusing to explain, but not confusing to do. She went outside to be with nature. She began to notice the aliveness of things. She allowed her eyes to fall on the beautiful flowers, the green grass, the tall trees, the blue sky, the singing birds, the crawling bugs, the nourishing soil, the bounding animals. It was all there, and they were all alive. They were all beings. Spaineva knew that it was impossible to be alone in the universe, so long as she noticed the aliveness of nature. It was alive with all the beauty and oneness that had always been there. The only requirement was that one merely open their eyes and recognize it. As she continued to notice the aliveness of nature, she began thinking of all of the people who felt sad for being alone. Spaineva held them in her thoughts as she felt the aliveness and the connection with nature. By doing this, she felt that she was helping to heal the loneliness through time and space for those who felt it many years before Spaineva inhabited her current body. As she continued to do this, she began to get images of people that she didn't know. These people, one after another, thanked her for what she was doing. They continually expressed their feeling of gratitude for her being able to feel this sense of a connection with the aliveness of nature through her.